Welcome to the Livbtr podcast. I'm Erica Spiegelman, addiction and wellness specialist and author, and along with me, I have my co-host, Jay Siano, a New York-based serial entrepreneur, business scaling expert, and wellness aficionado. We are here to inspire, encourage growth, and most importantly, to live better. Welcome to the Livbtr podcast. Our guest today is Dr. Elisa Hallerman. Dr. Hallerman has a debut book called SOULbriety. She will be talking to us about her company, Recovery Management Agency, the first agency devoted to helping addicts heal their addictions by reawakening their souls. We're so excited to have Dr. Hallerman on with us today. Welcome to the Livbtr podcast. My name is Erica Spiegelman, and my co-host, Mr. Jay Siano, is with us, and we have on Dr. Elisa Hallerman, who we're so excited to have on. Dr. Elisa Hallerman, she's a PhD JD and the founder of Recovery Management Agency, the first agency devoted to helping addicts heal their addictions by reawakening their souls. Dr. Hallerman has had such an interesting life story, so we're going to let her jump in and tell us a little bit about her path in this recovery world and how she started. And welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you. We're honored.
Thanks. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. So
let's talk about a little bit about your company, Recovery Management Agency, your book. Obviously we're going to get to, but how did that come to be? And can you tell us a little bit about your own path to recovery?
Yes. How much time do we have? No, I'm just kidding. So basically, I started drinking alcohol when I was about 17, and that was really my drug of choice throughout college and law school. It wasn't really until I got to Los Angeles and something really traumatic happened. I lost a very close friend to suicide, and I was introduced to other drugs. For me, it was cocaine. And that was the thing that really helped with my PTSD. I was suffering from really complex PTSD, undiagnosed, never went to therapy, never went for help, never was put on medication. And so I had all of these symptoms of anxiety and depression, but really terrible obsessive compulsive disorder symptoms, panic attacks. And I was just at a loss for how to take care of myself at such a young age. And I talk about in the book growing up, and that there wasn't any one particular acute trauma that happened. When we talk about trauma, often people think it has to be an assault or a one-time event, a car accident, or something of that nature. And the truth is there's chronic trauma, which is something that's happening over and over again. So it might be something that you don't necessarily look at, like being bullied in school, or the child of a divorce going back and forth from house to house, or moving a lot. And those things can couple on top of one another. And over time, there's something that is called chronic trauma. And then there's complex trauma, which really stems from having some sort of attachment disorder as a young child and having that be chronic trauma. And so there's lots of different ways, and it's pretty subjective. So for me, yes, I was always an alcoholic and a drug addict, but in order to do the real healing, I had to look at what was underneath. Otherwise, I probably would have relapsed. So long story short, I eventually am working in the entertainment industry. I'd been a lawyer previously in New York. I didn't want to practice anymore. I didn't want to move forward with this relationship that I was in and get married to him and have kids and move to the suburbs of New York City. None of that seemed like my plan. And so I moved to Los Angeles and started working in the entertainment industry. And I did not have any sort of quote unquote success until after I got sober. So I got sober in 2002. 20 years ago.
Wow.
And I and after that was when I started to really have success in my business. And when I say success in quotes, it's because my definition of what success looks like has changed over the last 20 years. Back then, it was more of this, more of that, shiny new toys, ego things that I thought I needed or wanted in order to be happy. And as you start to accumulate these things, you will, and I certainly did, find that I didn't feel better on the inside, that all of those things have a very short expiration date and they don't last for very long, and they're certainly not consistent. So I was forced then to look at, okay, what am I missing? And get curious about what else was going on for me and get curious about this inside work that people kept saying I needed to do, but I didn't know how to get in. I didn't know where that was, or I didn't have an understanding of any of that. And so what I did was very, briefly, I went on a vacation and I thought, all right, I'm going to read everything, listen to everything, sit on the beach alone, meditate, and just see what comes up for me. And one of the things I read was make a list of all the things you've ever wanted to do. Because I was at this crossroads with what my career was and my unhappiness at the same time. And you can't just, oh, I'm just going to walk away from this career I've had for 15 years. That's not realistic. But we do hear these whispers from soul, right? Asking us these big questions. So I sat on the beach and I made a list of all the things I ever wanted to do. And three of them were, I wanted to learn more about addiction. I wanted to be of service to other women, and I wanted to become an ER doctor, which I thought, okay, I'm going to go home and I'm going to take tiny little actions to see what of these I might be able to accomplish. So I was like, it's just an exercise, so let's not rule anything out. So I started Googling what classes I needed to take my MCATs, which is the test you need to get into medical school. Mind you, I'm like 42 at the time, so this is all like bananas. But I say, all right. And I realized I need to take a lot of math, which was not my strong point, which is why I went to law school in the first place. But it did lead me to UCLA, where I did discover these addiction counseling classes. And I thought, all right, let's start there. So I started taking classes at night while I was working. And eventually that led me to retire from the entertainment business and go back to school even further, get my master's and doctorate, and start this company. So how and why did I start this company? I struggled a lot with where to go, what kind of therapist, what is trauma, how do you find a practitioner, what is the right thing to do, where do you go? And also with my own family members that were suffering from addiction and mental health issues, and my previous clientele and my previous colleagues, there were so many people, and it just became the norm to, oh, my friend's sister went here, my dentist said that we should go to this therapist, and that seemed really antiquated and ridiculous to me. And we were Googling, and it was just kind of madness. And for me, when I was an attorney, people came to me with legal issues. And when I was an agent, they came to me to help them with their careers. And the more I learned in school and the more I realized what was out there, I said, I really want to create a place, an agency, do it off the blueprint of how I knew how an agency ran. And I had ran the talent department for many years and thought, all right, I want this to be a place where people who are either having substance abuse issues or behavioral addictions or any kind of mental health issue, whether that be anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, psychosis or any sort of trauma can just call and say, hey, now what? Here's where I am. And now what do I do? And that is how it started. And it's built over the last 12 years out to this, bigger agency. And we added a lot of different departments so that we could really lower the stress levels of our clients and educate them and then advocate for them as they go through the process so they can focus only on their healing.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. It's so needed. Yeah, I'm in Los Angeles too, and I also went to UCLA and got my KDAC from there, or I went through the school and graduated from there, and then became a counselor. And I also have worked at every treatment center under the sun in Los Angeles for the past 15 years, and it is very difficult when we have. And I also have a private practice now. I have a family that comes to me and says, where do I put them? I don't have this insurance. They only take this insurance. It's a very daunting road for families, especially with the stress they're going through, or at least the fears that they have it's a very delicate time. And so how amazing to be able to have somewhere to point them to. And it sounds like you also just take care of them, not just place them somewhere, but it sounds like you also have like case management and all these other things going on where it's a long-term support, right?
Yeah, it is long-term support. And, case management is something that a lot of people will do. And so I really wanted to differentiate. And that's why we're called recovery management, because first of all, our clients are not cases to us. They're real people. And second of all, it's not just about the time period when they're in treatment. So the first thing we do, if it's not crisis management and they don't need to get someplace medically necessary, hospitalized or someplace else very quickly, is we do these full assessments. And so we're really looking for the story of their lives and understanding what their strengths are, what are the things that light them up, where might there have been ruptures in the past, what therapies have worked for them, what hasn't worked for them, what's their processing in the way that they learn. All of these things are going to dictate how, when, why, and the place of all of these things that we're considering. I think often people are operating from a place of fear, and they will make quick decisions and spend lots of money and hope that if I just send them here, these people will fix them. And that's just not how it is. Like we're all very unique individuals with our own soul and our own set of experiences. And unless we know what that is for that person, we can't really move them in the right direction and have their buy-in in wanting to do the work, because they're not connected in a way that they need to in order to feel safe. And so that's a big piece. We work with the entire family or family system if it's not the blood relatives. And we also speak to all the clinicians. We read all psych testing, all discharge paperwork from other places. And so we're very, very thorough in our team approach of what we're going to do and what we're going to recommend. And then we've gotten some clients that have had really interesting, underlying diseases or circumstances. And so, we will go full force into, okay, let's learn everything about that. Let's, let's really understand that. Let's find the best doctor in the world for that. So we're really putting together teams based on the individual.
It is amazing. So, well, you two obviously have a background that you guys do this all day, and I'm just a recovering addict, alcoholic, and I'm still getting used to actually saying those words.
Not just. That's a big deal.
No, this is the first time I've ever heard him say that.
Oh,
That's
okay.
the first time.
I mean, and I think it's very interesting because when I started reading the book, I have to hold up SOULbriety because it absolutely touched my heart, and I really felt like as I mentioned to you before we started recording, I was reading my own story in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of us share the same story, but we operate out of fear. And it's really, really difficult. An addict tends to protect themselves from actually saying the words I just said, because if I say that, I can't go have a drink with my friend and, so on and so forth. And Erica and I went to college together, and we have so many friends that are still partying the same way that we were in college. And it's becoming more and more apparent. And, I scared myself during COVID where, I own businesses, I run businesses, and either I was going to drink the stress away and continue to drink away the trauma of the loss of my mother. And I'm sorry, I'm saying a lot, but, I started to remove alcohol, and, I haven't had other substance issues. So it really was alcohol for me. But the more I removed alcohol, the more I started to wake up, and all of my problems started to go away. And you guys both experienced that a lot earlier than me. But I think there's a lot of people suffering today that, don't realize that the panic attacks, anxiety, and depression are tied to the substances,
Yeah.
and all of that. It's really amazing what you're doing.
Yes. Oh, Jay, I'm so proud of you. So glad you shared. And I'm so glad the book had any awesome effects on you. That's great.
For sure.
Yeah, I just want to highlight what you just said, which is, the reason that it's so important to sort of pause and do the assessments is because symptoms from using drugs and alcohol, symptoms from actual mental health diagnoses, and symptoms from trauma all look identical until you pull them apart and you can really establish which is which. So at least in the beginning, having a period of abstinence, whether they're an alcoholic or an addict, is something you're going to want to be able to do. And also do understanding what trauma means and being trauma focused and not just trauma informed, in order to really understand how to help that person self-regulate long enough that you can then start to unpack everything else that's going on.
Absolutely. There's so many steps to it. Elisa, I wanted to ask you, when we talk about the how, when you were saying how do I, because a lot of people will say, how do I start the work? What does that mean? And I was just on another podcast recently with a man who's an author, he's a great guy, and he was saying how he healed from a somatic, like in his body, he screamed, he punched, he hit, he went through some program like that. And he said, that's how he healed. And I said, for myself, maybe I still have some more work to do on my inner child or other things that I've more healed, I think, from changing the way I think, for me and my own personal recovery journey. And also what I write about as well in my books is about just, again, changing our thought habits, how important that is, creating a better relationship you have with yourself, your thoughts, the self-love, the talk, the self-compassion, getting yourself through things. For me, that was the most effective. So I'm curious for people out there, even for myself, it's like, what else can we do? What is that? What does that look like? At least, like for you, what was that inner work that you did that was effective and that you feel like it helped propel you to the next, or evolved you to the next chapter in your life?
Yes. Well, so I studied depth psychology, and that's DEPTH. And depth psychology is oriented around the unconscious. So it's a deep belief in the unconscious. And so, most of us are operating from a place of consciousness where we're walking through our everyday life and we're seeing what we're seeing. Not everything that comes in through our five senses and gets, and goes through our brain that stays in our consciousness. A lot of that will go into our unconscious, the things that we see or hear or smell or that are happening around us. And the unconscious is made up of two parts. One is the personal unconscious and one is the collective unconscious. So there's our personal unconscious, which is really the feelings that are down there waiting to trigger you, right? They're your complexes. They're the very personal things that were maybe one time present and are no longer, that we've pushed down. Whereas the collective unconscious is really home to all the inherited collection of all of our universal experiences. It's where archetypes live. So you mentioned the inner child, right? That is an archetype and something that all across countries and religions and languages, right? If you say inner child, they're going to have a sense of what that means. Why is that? Because there's something about the collective and archetypes that we all understand. So really doing this sort of depth work or soul work is about, I talk about growing down. So what does that mean? It means we want to grow down into this part of ourselves and make what has been unknown known. So a lot of times things will all of a sudden be like, oh my God, I didn't even remember that. Or, you know, I'm so uncomfortable here. Like, I don't understand why. Or every time I walk into this store, I just get this bad vibe, right? And sometimes things will pop up into our consciousness, or we'll have a dream, and something will pop in or something like that. Someone will say something and it'll make us remember something else. But what if you could actively do soul work? What if you could actually tap into the unconscious? And that is what doing soul work is about, so that it doesn't have to be so random, and that you can tap into your intuition. You can tap into your soul self. You can meet these other personas that are living within in your, personal unconscious. And you can really get curious about what's happening inside your psyche, not just what's going on in our heads. Because I don't know about every addict and alcoholic, but this is a confusing place. And there's a lot of noise and it's very dramatic. And sometimes I just need to put my hands on my heart, close my eyes, and go in. That feels safer.
I'm curious. You mentioned that you started drinking in your late teens, 17. How were you introduced to alcohol?
So it was the summer before my senior year in high school, and I was at Tufts taking summer classes, or I don't remember any of the classes, but I do remember like the fun, right? So I was in Boston with, a bunch of kids doing what we do. And
Sure.
some of my friends from home had come to visit, and they came with the alcohol. And so they just started mixing and pouring drinks. And I was like, all right, I'll try it. And so I think someone made me like, I don't know. I feel like it was vodka and orange juice or something. And I'm allergic to orange juice anyway. So I was like, whatever. And so I tasted it. And from the very first taste, I was like, this is disgusting. This is disgusting. But okay, let me keep going. And so I tried a couple more sips and I started to get that warm sensation. And then I had a little bit more and I started to feel better than I ever felt in my life. And I was like, got it. Okay. Fun night. Cut to, let me just bring it back for a second. So at Tufts was a boy that I was in love with. And he did not know my name. He never looked over. I was this very slim, no real like vavoom going on, if you know what I mean. And he was going out with this blonde, very vavoomish girl. So I was like, I didn't stand a chance. but I loved him from afar. And so cut to later that night, I'm passed out on the ground, and Prince Charming walks over and he says, like, "Oh my God, do you need any help?" And I was like, "Oh my God, he's talking to me." And then he looked for my keys because they were in the wet grass. And then he carried me, oh my God, up to my room. And then I proceeded to throw up all over him. And to me, that was Hawkeye equals alcohol. And I'll just continue that for a very long time because that's how it worked for me.
Yeah, no, that's why I asked. It's interesting because I was introduced around the same time. I was an athlete. I got injured, and the minute that I got injured, and I couldn't really play sports at the same level.
Mm-hmm.
I was just drawn to the people that were doing all the things that were foreign to me at the time. And the minute that I had my first drinks, I was like, everything I'm insecure about is now gone. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember I was a cheerleader senior year, and I'm very small. And so I was the girl who was always on top of the pyramid. And I decided to smoke weed for the first time and then go out and cheer. So I just remember the first time being high on top of the pyramid and being like, "This is so cool."
That's so funny.
Yeah.
That is the best visual.
That's a great story. I know.
In my little cheer outfit, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Elisa, I mean, you guys were like late bloomers. I started at 13, but my point of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. 13.
Oh no, I'm just, 13. Yeah, I was going to Grateful Dead shows and doing mushroom. I mean, anyway, I'm not going to get into it.
I was a deadhead as well.
You were? Yeah.
Not at 13.
I'm from San Francisco, so I was sneaking out going to the Haight-Ashbury. I was going to, it was young.
Yeah.
That's
but
young.
But the thing is, we had on the director of Rutgers Addiction Center, Dr. Danielle Dick, last week, and she was just saying how when you're young like that too, if you're somebody that is curious or likes excitement or is more prone to trying things, and you attune to those people, normalizes it, so that you're attracted to friends that have that same kind of personality type. And that's kind of what I felt like I fell into. My parents were divorced, and at 13 we moved to a new area, and I attuned to the other kids that had divorced parents, which they didn't really have supervision and all these things.
Right.
But what I was gonna kind of, what ties all this into your story too, is that I felt like the minute that I 13 started, the mask went on.
Yep.
As a someone who was a people pleaser my whole life and put in the middle of a very not so great divorce, it was very easy for me to be whoever I needed to be for whoever wanted me to be a certain way. So alcohol was perfect in that way. And I feel like that only just kept on growing as, the college started. And then after college, I lived in New York, and, just one mask after the other. And in front of my family, I was this, at work, I was this, and how fragmented and disconnected you become from who you really are. I had even no idea to know who I was until I got sober at 27 years old. So I'm just curious for you, when you got sober later on in life, like, did you feel like that sense of authenticity was gone or missing, or did you have like a sense of who you used to be at 17, 18? How far along were you, because I feel like I don't know.
Yeah, such a great question. I mean, for me at 13, I probably would have, I was the girl with the perm and the much bigger nose and the braces. So I was not really, no one really wanted me to go to any Dead shows with them at that point. It wasn't until later that I sort of came out of my shell. But I put on many, many masks with my drinking and my using. And the problem is with masks is that over time, the longer we're wearing them, the more we believe that we are that mask. And that's why we really lose our sense of self. So at 33, when I got sober, I had no idea who I was. I had no idea what I liked. I had no idea how to dress. I had no idea how to behave. I had no idea how to have a conversation. I
Yeah.
had no concept of who I was, so much so that I would take little things from other people as my own until I figured out who I was. I would get dressed in the morning, and I talk about Trixie, my disease, and how I wore that mask for many years, and her lifestyle and her fashion sense, was bananas too. And nothing I would wear, in the light of day. And I would get dressed to go to work, and I had no concept of like, is this okay? So I used to say to
Mhm.
myself, would Nicole Kidman wear this? And if the answer was no, which is a lot of the time, she would never wear a lot of the things that Trixie would wear or that were in my closet, then I would change. And so
Mhm.
that's sort of how I started developing a sense of style. And then one time I was driving, and this was soon after I got sober, and I had this little sports car, and it was still kind of grimy from like the drugs and the alcohol, and you wash it but still like you sense it. And
Yeah.
anyway, I'm driving and I stop at a light, and this car also stops at a light, and as the girl drives by me, it's this girl with this blonde hair, and it's flowing and the window's open, and she's in this black truck and music's playing. And to me, she looks like the happiest person in the world. So I go home and I dye my hair blonde, white blonde, which looked terrible on me, by the way. And I bought a black Escalade. So, like, this is what I would do because I
Yeah.
was so lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that because I have always had a strong sense of self. I have my own style. I'm into certain things. And in my life, and I just gave a talk about this last week, I very much will look at certain things in people that I admire, and I will borrow pieces of that to create this patch quilt. And
Hmm.
really, in my career, I did it initially because when I saw somebody that was a really good broker, I would understand, I would study, I just study human habits,
Hmm.
and it's something that um, I've, like I said, intentionally taken certain things to adopt them and then make them my own, and I very much do that. So I think part of the doing that for me has actually been a positive thing
Hmm.
in my life. And it's interesting though, because now hearing you guys say this stuff, I think about how detached you are from your true self,
Yes.
right? From really
Right.
understanding yourself. You're intentionally really numbing yourself, right? Like I know that after my mom passed away 20 plus years ago, and I was already drinking heavily prior to that, like I already had an issue with alcohol, and which is why Eric and I were such good friends in college.
Hmm.
But it's like I've only now started to admit and see the fault and flaws that my wife would point out,
Hmm.
who's normal, and so forth, because you're like lying to yourself about all the things. You have this different perception of yourself
Right.
than is a reality, and it's crazy to learn that in your 40s, like
Exactly.
is the term that you're using with mask, is that like a common term in the space,
Yes.
like wearing a mask?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, and it's normal to wear a mask.
Yeah.
I mean, people are going to show up in a certain way at different, with different people in different settings, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But they're aware they're wearing it and that they're showing up a certain way, and they can go home to their safe space and take it off, right?
Yeah.
And for those of us that get lost in, I talk about the mask of Lisa Hallerman, the talent agent,
Yeah.
and how I became her and this persona and believed. And that is when you're really stuck in ego. When you believe you are the mask, you are stuck in your ego.
Mhm.
And But where else are you going to be if you don't know your soul self? And that's why it's so important to go and do this inner work. And, one of the reasons that I created the methodology of SOULbriety was because I felt like, and then did extensive research on it for my dissertation, that people were doing soul work on themselves, and certainly people in recovery. And so there were a lot of questions I asked my participants, not straight out, to see if that was the case, if they were doing soul-centered work. And across the board, regardless of how much, time they had in recovery or how many relapses or any of that, the answer was yes. But the caveat was they didn't know they were doing it. They didn't have language for persona and masks and soul and journey and archetypes and the imaginal and the unconscious and all of these things that they didn't have language for. And I was like, okay, I'm going to create that language in a space of addiction medicine and trauma work where it doesn't exist. Because in order to be able to intentionally do this inner work and grow down, we need the language to be able to say what it is that we're doing. And so that's where the methodology of SOULbriety came from.
So amazing. It's so amazing. And it's so, I mean, it's so needed and necessary. I mean, I think a lot of people get stuck when I bring up spirit or soul or anything, they freeze, it's like, what does that mean? And so to have language that they can relate to, or at least everybody identifies with this differently, like we were saying
Absolutely.
before, everybody based on their history, the religion that, however they were raised, I mean, it's endless. And, I think gratitude and knowing your values are really important. And there's certain things you could do to kind of begin to turn on that, like, who am I? What matters to me? And also, I just wanted to ask too about this, which you mentioned in your book too, is like, it's finally, Jay and I talk about this, like, realizing you're betraying yourself, or you're not honoring yourself. You're not honoring your greatest good,
Right.
And so I think there's so many ways in which we do that. Some of us wear a mask and don't realize how that's a self-betrayal. Like, if I'm trying to be someone else, then I'm not really honoring who I am, my wants, my needs, my desires, my hopes, my fears. We're not doing that if we're putting on a mask. So I just wanted to ask you too, when it comes to betrayal and self-betrayal, I mean, is that like a non-negotiable? Are you consciously aware that is something you'll never do again for yourself in your own recovery? Is that something that you feel is important to share with people?
Well, we're human,
Yeah.
and we can have all the information and all the best of intentions, and we can, lose our way because there's more healing that needs to be done. And so when people relapse or slip, or people in sobriety lose their way, or their moral judgment is off, or they make a bad decision, it's shining a light on something that's not healed yet, that you have to look at. We talk a lot about the why. So it's not about not making mistakes or not doing the wrong thing or not having these, everyone's going to go through these soul journeys multiple times in your life. And we are going to take the wrong direction at times. And we will feel that incredible shame and that feeling of, why did I do that? And beating ourselves up. When we've noticed it, when we know it to be true, and we're ready to make something different, it's about looking at the why. Not why did the other person do this, or why is this person coming, if they had only done that, if this person had only done this, if I hadn't gotten fired, if he hadn't broke up with me, whatever it is. No, it's about, why were you in it? What are you doing? And what are you going to do now? And once you are doing that, that's when you're really going to go and have this time and go through this dark night of the soul and learn the wisdom that you're meant to learn. in this lifetime. It's not always going to be butterflies and rainbows. And I've made some big mistakes in sobriety and things that I wish I hadn't done. But the truth is, had I not done them, I wouldn't have had the experience that I've had. What would be a total loss would be if I didn't make meaning out of the experiences.
Yeah.
And that would be a shame. And that would be the self-betrayal. That would be where the self-betrayal is, but not the triumphs and tribulations that we go through. But
Yeah.
are we going to make meaning out of them or not? That's really where I think the self-betrayal comes in.
So important. You're right. What a great point.
Have either of you had the urge to drink or do anything else since you've gotten sober?
Definitely. Yes, the answer is yes. Much more so in early sobriety. But there have been those times when I've been in grief or heartbreak where the pain is so deep and so hard, and you really want to not feel, right? You feel like, well, everybody else can just have a sip of this or a pill of that, or, it's not, why do I have to feel in this much pain? And those times are hard. Those times are definitely hard. I've never wanted like that. Thank God for me, alcohol and drugs don't look good anymore. Like they look kind of gross to me at this point, 20 years later. But it is about wanting something, it doesn't have to be drugs and alcohol. It can be any other form of addiction or anything outside of myself to have an immediate relief from that intense pain. So I think for me at 20, that's the same thing as, that's the same thing.
Yeah, I have the opposite. I never really think of it. I have thoughts around it. The thoughts are there because it's normal, but I never never when it's a hard time. It's more of like to feel more like I'm bored, like not boredom, but being uninspired or being, like the monotony now of being a mom and like having little toddlers and sitting around the house, and my husband comes home and has a drink, and that's fine. I never want to drink because he's drinking per se, but it's almost like what are we going to do all night with these kids, or, that kind of thing. I want to feel more, like it's not during like when my grandfather just died or this happened, that I'm fine with. So it's interesting how the thoughts become more pervasive during different periods.
Me too. Yeah, actually, exactly the same, Erica. For me, it's more like, and again, this is all my relationship, with alcohol specifically is, it's newer that I started removing it, a few years back, and then ultimately removing it. And, it's more, am I ever going to quote unquote have fun again and just tear it up with my, my friends and whatnot. And, I just truly know that nothing good has ever come from me drinking. And
well, it's reframing all that and all those narratives for sure.
Yeah. And also recognizing what is fun. Like what was fun really wasn't fun unless you were out of your mind. Right.
Yeah.
So of course, if you go back and do it sober, it's not going to be fun. It was never fun. Right?
It was never fun.
So it's about finding things that are actually fun, which goes back to knowing yourself and what you love and what lights you up.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great segue. What is fun for you?
Well, the next fun thing that I have that I'm really, really looking forward to is I'm going to see Springsteen April 1st in New York. And
amazing.
I will be dancing for 5 hours, and I will have no voice, and I'll be singing every single song, and I wouldn't have it any other way but sober.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I know, that's amazing.
That's great. Well, you continue to accomplish a ton, and everybody should read this book. SOULbriety is the best book that I have read in some time, and it's really helping me with my own journey. So thank you for that.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I'm so happy.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Elisa Hallerman. You're so special, and we're so happy that you exist, and I'm so happy you exist in this world of recovery. And hopefully we'll only just keep on growing and stay connected, all of us.
Definitely.
So.
Well, I didn't know you guys
Yep.
were in LA. Like, let's go to lunch.
I'm in New York. I'm in New York.
Okay.
He's in New York. I'm in
Yeah.
LA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll see you at Springsteen.
Yeah, I'm not going, but I will be in LA in the near future. We should all get together.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
guys.
so
Thank
much
you so much
for
for
being with
having
us.
me.